This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity. This is synchronicity.
Welcome to Synchronicity. No guest this week, just me, but I got a lot of stuff going on, cool stuff, promised stuff being delivered, other things being announced. So first things first, it's in the name of the episode EP release, my first EP, the first thing I am publicly releasing. Up to date, the only people who have heard my music would be friends, classmates at college, people who stumbled upon hard to find SoundCloud pages, or people who listen to this podcast. So you probably are in that group if you've heard some of the music. But other than that, it's a very small group of people because I've never publicly released anything. I just haven't done it for a lot of reasons. And I want to talk about, at least in the first part of this episode, kind of the process, not the logistical or technical process of releasing an album or an EP or a single or any creative endeavor, but kind of the internal difficulties, struggles, obstacles, resistance, whatever you want to call it, to getting something out in the world. And luckily, I have this podcast that kind of greased the wheels in terms of me being able to actually say, all right, here's stuff that I've finished. It may not be my definition of perfect. It may not. I probably could endlessly tweak and change things, but I've made the decision. All right, this is a thing. I am releasing it into the world. So that's it. That seems like a very simple process, and I imagine for some people it is. They're just like, all right, I have this thing. I'm going to record these songs. I'm going to make these songs. Going to do it, and now it's out. That's awesome. I am not one of those people, but I also know I'm not someone who's just, terrible at this stuff. So I want to get my music out there. I want to get my art out there. So why did it take basically 20 plus years, really 15 plus years since I've been making music? No, we'll say 20. We'll go 17 and a half. We'll split the difference. Why did it take so long for me to publicly release stuff? And it's not because I'm not good. It's not because people didn't want me to. I've worked with a lot of artists. We've done some stuff, but why have I had this resistance to publicly putting stuff out there? And I think everyone has their own unique reasons, but my personal reasons have been, I could endlessly work on something until I felt comfortable, until I would feel comfortable that this is the perfect reflection of my best version of my artistic self, which is ridiculous. That's like a really stupid standard to hold yourself to. Some of our greatest musicians, artists, whoever you admire, like they've dealt with doubts too. And the first incarnations of what they were working on probably weren't their best either. So that's a ridiculous kind of ideal to hold yourself to. But conceptually knowing that and intellectually knowing that is different than kind of beating that resistance, and getting your stuff out there. So for me, what was the crucial turning point is seeing people who had stuff that they wanted to get out there, but not ever really being able to do that, and knowing that their stuff was good and kind of not wanting to replicate that pattern. But also just realizing that you can't become what you want to become unless you take the steps to get there. And I know that's kind of like a platitude, but what it means is if I want to go around telling people, yeah, I'm a musician, I make music. Yeah, I can tell people that. I went to a music college, I have a degree that says I do that, but really I'm just doing it for myself. It's my little thing. Maybe it's almost like one step removed from having a song in your head, and not committing it to recording or something like that. It's just one step removed from that. It's just your personal little selfish thing at the end of the day. And there's something to be said about creating art just for you, kind of in a ritualistic way. I'm not dismissing that in any way, but if you're really if you're creating music because you want people to hear it and you want them to appreciate it, and then you got to get it out there. So I realized the longer I was delaying that process, I mean, I've spoken about on this podcast now, it's a year late, this EP, and I'll get to the details, don't worry. I realized I could do this forever. I could just delay. This is just my thing. So by publicly kind of committing to saying that I'm going to be doing it, I thought last year that would give me kind of the, final push to get it out. But as it happened, I didn't have kind of the time and energy to get it done, and it wasn't really going to give me that final push. Saying it that I was going to release this helped me eventually get it out there, but that wasn't, again, the final kind of crucial piece that got me to do it. The crucial piece was just realizing, and was kind of in tandem with next week's guest, Dean Radin, who wrote a book called Real Magic. We'll talk about that a little bit. Realizing that if you want to create substantial change in physical 3D reality, you have to take tangible steps to doing that. And really doing it, right? I have the songs, I have the things, just finishing them, putting the final touches until they're ready for the world. So they're ready for the world. It wasn't that big of a step for me to take. It's not as though I, have been doing something my entire life and then all of a sudden I change my mind and I want to do something else. This is something that I've kind of been working towards for a very long time. So realizing that you actually have to take the practical steps and do it, and kind of letting that overcome any resistance or fear. And of course, I want to be clear about this. Every single time I put something out there, even if it's just a podcast, I have the same thoughts that anyone else would. Are people going to think this is stupid? Is this not going to be good? Are people going to misunderstand? Are they going to think I'm bad? This is just regular shit that everyone has to deal with. But when it comes to something, like music or a song you're releasing, this is something that was a very personal kind of connection to something that's esoteric, outside of you, kind of spiritual for a lot of people. Really committing that and giving that to other people as an offering, or providing that platform for an offering, is kind of a big deal. And you don't want to make it too big of a deal, because then you can be like, oh no, I'm never going to do it. But you also don't want to be just careless about it and just throw stuff out there. So finding that balancing act is also something that I've kind of struggled with. But at the end of the day, I just realized, fuck it. So many people have written to me being like, when's the EP coming? I really enjoy your music. Please release it. And I was just like, all right, I'm now just basically being a jerk and letting other people down by not doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing. And finally, the final piece was, I just kind of listened to that inner voice, just what are you supposed to be doing? What do you want to do with your life? And if you're not taking a step back every so often, hopefully as regularly as possible, and listening to that voice, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice, because that voice usually knows exactly what you want, because it's your voice, it's your unconscious, it's yourself, it's your spirit, whatever you want to call it. But it really has pretty practical information for you in terms of achieving what you think you want, or what you actually want sometimes. So pay attention to all those things. I really do encourage any artist, any creatively, person who's getting in touch with their creative abilities or wants to express them. Maybe you don't even know if you are. Just pursue it, right? Okay, this is not saying I'm going to release this EP. It's going to be the best thing ever. Everyone's going to go nuts. Oh my God, look how big of a genius is. That's why you should release it. That's why you should get your stuff out there. No. It's probably going to be like everyone else's kind of release out into the world these days. The people who are tuned in and appreciate it will like it. Hopefully that spreads to some other people. But I'm not going to be Lil Wayne and Kanye topping the charts. Nicki Minaj. I don't know who's on top of the charts. I have no idea. I go on Spotify, listen to the stuff sometimes. It's not bad. It's terrible when you listen to stuff that was top of the charts 50 years ago. But what are you going to do? But you should get it out, because it's just as an integrative process for being a human being. I think it's really important to share stuff. Now, try to also take the time. I took 20 years, 15 years before I felt that I had something, and that's not true. I didn't take 15 to 20 years to feel like I had something I could share. It took me 15, 20 years to overcome the resistance to sharing that stuff. it probably took me like 5 years before I had something that was worth sharing. Truthfully, to a large group of people, someone a long time ago told me, don't ever share anything that's not finished if you plan on getting it released. And I've routinely just dismissed that, not intentionally, but I've done it with this podcast. I've released plenty of unfinished music in the intros and things like that. And I don't know that that's great advice to not release things. Sometimes just as an exercise to see how people react to something is a good idea. And I really recommend that everyone do it. But also taking the time to hone your craft and really be sure of what you're trying to say and what you're trying to communicate as best you can is also important. So again, this is not a one-sided just do it all the time. There is this kind of discernment and reflection that's needed. Anyway, I've talked about enough. And what I'm not going to do is either hype or not hype my album. You shouldn't be self-critical when releasing anything creative. You shouldn't say, hey, well, it's not that great, it's not that good. And I know I kind of did that before. I'm just saying I'm not going to be number one. I'm realistic about that. All right. But you also shouldn't overly hype your stuff. Don't fake hype your stuff. I'm pretty excited about this album because it's a reflection of what I've been working on, and I actually finished enough things that I could say, here, it's done. Outside of that, you be the judge. So here we go. The name of the album is Kykeon. That's Kykeon. That's a name. It came to me today. It's basically the sacrament that was used in the Eleusinian mysteries. Some people think it was a psychedelic, but for me, what it signifies is kind of this alchemical process of shifting your consciousness away from the world of kind of mundane, everything is logical, rational, to also incorporating and beginning to mix in kind of this super normal, supernatural, mystical kind of woo-woo stuff, but that is also real and not totally made up stuff. So that's why the album is called Kykeon. It's an EP. There's 4 tracks. One of those tracks, the first one, is only 57 seconds long. So it's really 3 tracks with kind of an intro. Regardless, I'm really, really happy with it. I'm super happy to be getting it out. It is premiering on all of your favorite channel, iTunes, Spotify, basically every place you can listen to music. It should be out in the next few days. I have a distribution going out everywhere, and you'll be able to buy it, and I'll be setting prices and all of that. However, for podcast listeners, if you want it, I'm making it available on my website, syncpodcast.com, syncpodcast.com, or for Patreons, $9 level. Anyone who's already a patron on Patreon at the $9 level, goes without saying, you get this for free. You've been putting in the time. But anyone else, you can sign up for that, get the album, download it, and then immediately revert back to a lower level if you're that type of person. But I just want to make this available for listeners of the podcast first, so it will be out, and you'll be able to search for it and all your favorite stuff. And I appreciate it. If you could support it, that's cool, but only support it if you really like it. That's really what I want you to do. I don't really want to talk about too much about the album. The music, I hope, speaks for itself. There is a concept behind it that I kind of retroactively fit in, and I'll probably put that into some liner notes that I'll include with the album. But outside of that, I'm just happy to have finished it and got it out. So yeah, that's it. So now moving on to 2 things that I'm super interested in. I mentioned Real Magic by you can see that my autocorrect changed it to Dean Radio, but his name is Dean Radin, Radin. And it's a really, really awesome book. And it's fucking amazing. And I have him coming on Monday, so that'll be out for you next week. It's just an astounding book. Go pick it up if you want to kind of get tuned into what has been percolating in my mind over the past week and what next week's guest will be talking about. But in it, there's just so much awesome stuff about how reality and magic and science is just not only exists and not only just not made up, but really just the implications of what that means for us as humans, as individuals, as a collective is astounding. I'm not going to get too much into this because I want to get into it with Dean next week, but I've been trying to reconcile that with what's going on from a pragmatic, practical standpoint in the United States political situation. I spent some time last week on the intro talking about it with the Brett Kavanaugh situation and the Supreme Court. And I think I recorded that after, I think I recorded it after Blasey Ford's testimony. And, everyone was just like, all right, this dude's done. And then a couple hours later, I watched Brett Kavanaugh's testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. So now we'll just recap it just a little bit. I'm sure everyone's seen it, and I'm sorry you're going to get politics if you don't want it, but I've never seen anything like that. It was insane. I was live tweeting it because I was just astounded that this was going on. His just, he just from the second he came out, and I know there are probably people who disagree. I know there are people who disagree with me about whether he did what he's alleged to have done. But I mean, dude, I went to school. I went to parties with people like Brett Kavanaugh. Like, that's what you need to understand. That culture is embedded. It's the indigenous culture of Bethesda, Maryland. My high school was Bethesda, Chevy Chase High School. These private school kids are just, you won't meet more entitled people in your entire life. Their parents are important people. They've assumed that they're important people, and they just don't give a shit. And that basically what you saw is a rich, spoiled white dude complaining that he wasn't getting what he was promised he was going to get. That's what we saw. And it was insane. And I was pretty sure that wasn't going to, that was going to exclude him from getting into the Supreme Court as a Supreme Court justice. However, now we're a week later. Wrong. I'm pretty sure we're sitting here on Thursday. What is it, October 3rd? Pretty sure he's going to get confirmed. The waffling kind of indecisive votes are looking like they're going to go towards confirming him after this FBI investigation that I guess they didn't interview anyone who actually was involved, but regardless, it looks like it's going to happen, which is pretty fucking crazy, just to be clear. And it's heightening this polarity, this polarization that's happening. It's making it even bigger. It's just really rankling people, as you can see by me even speaking about it, right? I don't tend to bring up politics on this podcast, but it's a really big deal. So that's where we got three things going on here, right? We got the real magic, kind of Dean Radin, holy shit, what the fuck is going on? There's some crazy stuff going on in the world that is empirically verifiable. Then we have this total crazy polarization in our political and cultural situation, where it's seemingly beginning to be okay to be a racist and be overt about that. And we won't get into the the historical and the analogies and kind of the similarities of what happened. I'm not saying we're turning into Nazi Germany, but you'd be surprised how far along we are in the process before Hitler really came to power and like flipped the script on everyone. You'd be surprised where we are in that. So those are the two things. And then the third thing is what is supposed to be kind of a bastion or I hope I'm using that word right, kind of like a stabilizing factor in many people's lives. It used to be religion. Is this sense of spirituality, is this sense of, there's something more to the world that can inform our decisions based, things related to wisdom and compassion and generosity, these things. And often where we go to find those things are teachers or communities. And I spoke about this last week with Dr. Miles Neal, basically talking about how a lot of this stuff has turned into watered down versions of what the real kind of magic and juice of that stuff and kind of these lineages and some of the real wisdom that's embedded in there. It's kind of just, that's been genetically modified and extracted from its casing and put in packages that they serve up, and all this glossy and nice looking stuff to people in the West to feel better about a kind of shitty situation, right? The environment's not looking so hot. It looks like fascism is on the rise. And I am not saying this, I saw, I don't know who it was, a famous author posted something on his Facebook page that a lot of people were sharing. It was just like this whole depressing kind of like the world is going to be destroyed environmentally in 50 years, guaranteed. Like it was just basically like doomsday kind of apocalyptic, thoughts of someone who seemed relatively depressed. I'm not saying that everything is fucked. We're all screwed. We should be screaming. But what I am saying is that if we just keep kind of presenting mindfulness or spirituality or yoga or whatever these things is, just kind of tools for us to numb ourselves or be a little bit better feeling about ourselves while everything around us is burning, eventually that just isn't going to work anymore. And I think we're kind of getting to that point. So the intersection of all of these things, real magic in the world, real kind of awesome, crazy stuff that we've seen happen, synchronicities are obviously a part of that. The cultural situation and societal situation we find ourselves, which is just high volatility, and then also that volatility seeping into the spiritual kind of community world. And so my final point with all of this is to say that if you're finding yourself gravitating towards people who are talking about, new age stuff or psychedelics or spirituality or technology or any of the really cool and interesting things that one could tune into these days, and they're not talking about any of the other fucked up shit that's going on, whether that's, sexual harassment or assaults or immigration situations or just, fucked up stuff. And they're tuning into people like Jordan Peterson who are making excuses for these people and helping to kind of embolden them. Just stay on that shit. Be aware of it, because it's really good sometimes to use kind of spirituality or parapsychology or dreams or any of this stuff as a distraction from our actual lives, which is why, as weird as some of these episodes can get, one of the things I really like to do is ask people at the end, what's a practical tip? Just because, bring it back down to earth. What are you doing when you're not talking about your thing? What's something that's helped you when shit gets really tough, right? When something is, your world is falling apart, what are you leaning on? What has been there for you? And I really like to hear about from people because that's important. So I'm bringing that up just because I think we're getting to the point where if you're not calling this stuff out, and you don't have to be depressing about it. I think the Brett Kavanaugh situation is horrible. It is this has been some of the funniest shit I've ever seen. This guy asked a senator, do you ever play quarters? This is fucking insane. Anyway, my point is this is just be aware of what's going on. Don't be one of the people who go to Burning Man to kind of escape their shit lives where they're working for the man or doing things that they don't want to be doing, supporting a system they don't want to be supporting, just so they can calm down for a week. And if you're one of those people, that's okay, but just try to bring this stuff into the rest of your life. I realize not everyone can kind of just pull the plug and be like, all right, I'm going to give this whole alternative living thing a style. A try, I'm going to get into cryptocurrency and be rich all of a sudden. That's not what I'm advocating for. What I'm saying is just be aware that all this stuff is intimately connected. So if you're not paying attention to the kind of rise of white nationalism, misogyny taking on a fevered pitch in this world, you got to pay attention to that stuff. Anyway, I think that's it. I think this is what a fun album release episode. That's what I'm calling the State of the Unity. I really do. Listen, we are all connected. I know people who support Kavanaugh. I don't agree with them in any way, shape, or form. But I'm willing to allow their kind of conditioning or their own thoughts determine what they believe, just as I'm allowed to determine what I believe. I can vehemently disagree with them, but this isn't to say you have to agree with one position or another. It's just that you want to stay open-minded about this stuff, and you want to remain compassionate about this stuff too. You don't want to just shit on people who don't agree with you. You can kind of shit on Brett Kavanaugh. This is definitely a douche. But for the most part, be respectful of everyone you meet to the best of your ability, and just recognize that all this shit is connected. So with that, how about we end this mini episode? I'm excited for these guests I have coming up. I mentioned one, Dean Radin. I have others who you definitely know. They're not going to be people you don't even know. They're going to be people you've heard of. So I'm going to try to keep all of this going throughout the fall. I love the fall. I love apples. This episode, by the way, this isn't going to be... I now have to backtrack every single time I release these because I did... All right, we'll do a fake ad first. This episode is brought to you by apples. I love apples. If you're someone who likes sweet apples, you're an idiot. you're supposed to be looking for tart apples. Those are the good ones. Big shout out to Montgomery Place on Route 9, Red Hook, Rhinebeck area in New York. They got some of the best antique variety of apples. This is kind of a real ad for them now. Go check them out. Although they've been running out, someone has been catching on to these apples. I like these Ashmead apples. They got the Belle de Bois scoops. I love these. They're tart, delicious, full-bodied apples. But someone's going and they're buying all these out. They're only there for like a day or two. They used to last for like a week, but now people are buying these all out. Honestly, I might go get these apples right after I'm done recording this. So yes, apples. This episode brought to you by apples. This episode is actually also brought to you by Meister. I mentioned Meister in the last episode. This is a real sponsor, so actually go support these people. It helps me. It helps them. It's a win for everyone. This is your weed. I'm not calling it cannabis. Fuck out of here. I call it a weed. I'll say that as lovingly as possible. It's weed. I love it. This is your weed accessory company. I mentioned the stash tray last episode. I'm going to mention it again. This is something that if you are a daily or regular smoker and you have a significant other who is a tidy type of person, who doesn't want weed clippings and little things, places, this is for you. Also, this is a really easy thing. You can have a self-contained unit where you basically have all your stuff. You can put it on a bookshelf. Looks like a book. So it's pretty cool. It's called the Stash Tray. You can get anything on getmeister.com. Meister is with a Y, M-Y-S-T-E-R. So go check it out. Use the code SYNC at checkout, SYNC, and you get 15% off whatever you get. If you get a bunch of stuff, that's more money off. That's how it works. You don't know how percentages work? I just taught you. Thank you. I meant to say you're welcome. You're welcome. That's it. We've got a mix of business. We got a bit of creativity and music. We got a bit of culture and society. And we got a bit of ranting. That's a complete episode in my book. How about no, I already told you, right? Kykeon, the album, I told you where to get it. Right now, there's really nothing you're going to do. By the time this is released, there's an off chance it'll be on all of those platforms, iTunes, all that stuff. But if it's not, you can just go to Patreon right now, sign up for the $9 level, which is the Get All My Music level. You get all of my music that I've released on this show, but also this album you will get, I guess, for free, kind of, but you just paid $9 to do it. And there's a bee in here. Okay, there's a bee in my house. I'm going to take that as a sign to leave. So I'll be doing that, and I will see you next week.